Hi, everyone. It's me, Tiffany, here in my bathrobe with my Bible. So, if your life is messy like mine, if you haven't did your hair yet today, or you've got dogs wrestling like WWE in the background in a messy house behind you, come sit down with me in my mess. Let's be real together and let's deep dive into the Word of God. So, today, I want to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, and it's the topic of grieving. This is not a fun thing to talk about. It's certainly not a fun thing to go through, but this is so important for all of us. Because if you are in a stage of life right now where you're like, everything is awesome, yay, good for you. I'm happy for you. I don't say that sarcastically. Seriously, I'm glad if everything in your life is awesome right now. And if you're thinking grieving, I've never had to grieve. I've never lost anybody that I love. Yay! I'm happy for you. But you will. Every one of us will face grief because we are all going to lose somebody that matters. So if you haven't experienced this yet, I'm sorry to say, buckle up. It's coming your way sometime. If you're currently going through the grieving process, we see you. We love you. We are here for you. We're all in this together. And if you have got grieving in your rear view mirror, I am happy for you. If you have come through a time of grieving, I'm also happy if things have gotten better. So wherever you're at in that sphere of grief, this is a subject that applies to all of us. Now, something that I get asked a lot as a pastor's wife is, what do I say to people that have lost someone they love? I never know what to say. I don't know what to do. For people that are grieving and sad, I just don't know how to handle it. Oh, there's Henry, my standard poodle. He got him haircut yesterday. Him's looking all pretty. I get asked about this a lot, and I do try to take time to stop and talk to people who are grieving. And it's because I have experienced great grief in my life. My big losses, I lost both of my granddads at a young age and one grandmother at age 5, but I was so young, it didn't really affect me. My children grieved the loss of my dad while I was grieving the loss of my dad, and they were very young, and they were more affected by the loss of my dad as children than I was. Connor and Cooper were 5 and 2, respectively, when my dad passed away. I was in my early 30s, and I miss my dad. I miss my dad very much. He died at age 65. I was 33 when he passed away, about to turn 34. And I lost my dad early on in the game, and he was my rock. He was a very logical, put together man. He was a pilot in the Air Force. He became a brigadier general in the Air Force. He was the wing commander of the Oklahoma National Guard. You can tell I'm proud of my dad. I loved him. He was wonderful. He taught me a lot, and he always checked in on me and called me doll and let me know that he loved me and he thought I was beautiful. I'm the oldest of 4 girls, and he was a great girl dad. He told us every day that he loved us and we were beautiful and smart and wonderful. And my dad filled my love cup. And I missed that. He was a big cheerleader in my life, and I lost him early. He never got to meet Sofifi. He would have loved her. He would have loved seeing me with a girl, with a daughter, with the giant flowers and all the things I did with Sofifi. He would have loved that. And he would have so enjoyed seeing Connor and Cooper at every age and stage that they've had since 5 and 2, since he left and didn't get to see them again. So you can tell because I'm smiling. I'm looking back on those times with my dad with fondness. I wasn't always able to talk about the loss of my dad like I can today. I lost my Damon, my baby sister's husband, in Afghanistan. That was by far, it was a combat death, killed in action. We are a Gold Star family. And that was by far the hardest, most difficult loss that our family has ever faced. It was unexpected. It was tragic. There are so many layers to a military death, to a combat death. It It was really hard. I will probably share that whole story one day. Won't do it today because I need to talk about grief more in general. But that was a very specific kind of grieving and grief process that we walked through with my sister Audrey and her babies. She had a 4-year-old and a 14-month-old, and it was hard. So I don't know what it's like to lose my husband at a young age, but I've seen it from a sister's perspective, and I walked beside my girl the whole way. We all did. So we know a little bit about that. I have a taste of what that feels like, but I don't understand it myself, and I would never say I do. So I have experienced grief. I have lost people that I love. Besides those two main, events, I have lost peers that I love. I have not lost a very close friend yet or a sibling yet. So I can't really understand those deaths, but the ones that from my experience that I can relate to are those. And then the loss of my dog, Boaz. And that needs to be said. It was difficult. If you have lost a pet, I'm so sorry. I understand it's hard. But let me tell you, it is not the same as losing a person. And we'll get into that and things we should not say to grieving people. And up front, the death of a dog or a cat or a beloved horse or pet is not the same as the death of a person. We all expect to outlive our pets because we're not idiots. We know the lifespan of our pets, expected lifespan, and we know the expected average lifespan of a human being, which is in the 70s of years. And the expected lifespan of a pet is less than 20. And it is not the same as losing a person. So if you are guilty of saying, I'm so sorry that you're sad about your husband or your parent or your child dying, I know what you feel like. I lost my pet, fill in the blanks. Nay. We've got to stop saying that to grieving people. It makes things worse. So as a pastor's wife, I have compiled a list of things that are important to say. Here's Henry. He's got to say hello. Hello, Henry. I've compiled a list of things that we need to say to people who are grieving and going through this process, and some things that we need to stop saying to those same precious people because we love them. And the purpose here is to help them and not to make things harder on them. So let's get into it. Matthew chapter 5, verse 4. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Jesus lets us know in the beginning of his ministry in the Sermon on the Mount, which prepares us for living for him in so many beautiful ways. He says right here, blessed are you when you're sad, when you're mourning, when you're grieving. You're blessed, and you will be comforted. You'll be comforted by God, if not by people who aren't saying very nice things to you, even though their intentions are good. People make mistakes, and they often say things that are not worth saying when we're grieving. It makes things so much harder. You will be comforted by God. That is a beautiful promise in his word. And it also lets us know that God intends for us to mourn. We have got to stop looking at grieving and the mourning process as if it's a taboo subject or something that a Christian shouldn't face. Let's go to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 18. And now, dear brothers and sisters, we want you to know what will happen to the believers who have died, so you will not grieve like people who have no hope. It doesn't say so you will not grieve. Please notice that. Grieving is an intended process for the believer. Believers, you're going to grieve the loss of a person that was important to you. Don't feel guilty. If you're grieving, it doesn't mean that you don't love Jesus. It doesn't mean that you don't believe that your dead loved one is in heaven, is rejoicing around the throne of God right now on the streets of glory, happy and free from pain. Grieving does not mean you don't trust God. You don't believe God. It doesn't mean that you're not thankful for a heavenly healing, even if you prayed for an earthly healing. Grief is an important part of the process. Henry Finn, no barking. Hopefully that doesn't go on this whole time. If I put him in his cage, he's going to fuss. Hey, no barking. If I keep him out, he's going to bark too. So, grieving. Hey, Henry, no barking. Sorry, y'all. Grieving is an important part of the process, and Jesus never intended for us to not grieve. All right. Now, that's all the scripture that I'm going to bring up in this today, because we don't grieve like others who grieve, but still we grieve. I'm going to keep reading. Henry, y'all, this dog, right? Hi, say hello to your fans and get down. He is a fan of mine, as you can see. All right. So we're not going to grieve like people who have no hope. Verse 14, for since we believe that Jesus died and was raised to life again, we also believe that when Jesus returns, God will bring back with him the believers who have died. And I'm going to skip down and read verse 18. So encourage each other with these words. So these are encouraging words from God. These words let us know that while we don't grieve as the unbelievers do, we're still going to grieve. Jesus said, blessed are they who mourn. And we are all going to go through a period of mourning in our lives at some point. Let me tell you some things, first of all, that are so very important. I hope you listen up and maybe grab a pen to write these down. Seriously, pay attention. These are things that people I have loved and helped through grief. Throughout the course of my ministry and through my 50 years in life, I've been actively involved in ministry. Since I graduated from Bible college as a 21-year-old, I've been actively involved in ministry every day of my life since then. So these are things that people have shared with me, because I've asked people who have come through the phases of grief, and on the backside, they can look back and see things that were helpful to them and things that were not so helpful to them. And I've asked people who are not in the throes of grief, but people who have come through it, what did people say that made this worse for you? So this is not my opinion. These are words straight from the mouths of people who have suffered loss in their lives. One thing that they don't want to hear from us is, I know how you feel. Because we don't. We don't know exactly how this person feels about this loss. You could have experienced the death of a mom, and this is their mom who died. You could have experienced the death of a father, and this is their father who died, or a spouse, or a child. The one place where I think this statement, I know a little bit how you feel, is helpful is in the death of a spouse or the death of a child. And I'm always careful to say, even if I'm talking about the death of my dad and someone has recently lost their dad, I will say, I don't know what you're going through, but I know a little bit about this kind of loss because I've lost my own dad and I've walked through that road, and I know that this is a hard time, and I love you and I'm praying for you right now. So I'm acknowledging that I have the same loss as them. We both lost our dads. But while we both lost our dads, we could be grieving in very different ways. I told you about my dad, how he was, just wonderful, logical, intelligent. I loved talking to my dad about pretty much anything in my life. Every time he called me, he would ask me how my kids are doing, how my husband's doing, how our church is doing, what's going on with you, doll. He would start off almost every conversation with, how are you doing, doll? What's going on with you? How's Denny? How are the kids? He always wanted to know about my life. And when I would tell him the struggles and the stresses that I'm going through in life, he'd say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Babe, that sounds terrible. It's going to be okay. Chin up. Hang in there. He was just that dad. He was an encourager to me. And that's my perspective of the loss of a dad. Oh, I miss that. But I have to be aware that the person whose dad just passed away, they could have the opposite experience with the loss of their dad. Maybe their dad beat them. Maybe their dad abused them physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually. Maybe their dad wasn't a godly father. Maybe their dad didn't love them. Maybe when their dad died, they were at odds with their father and hadn't spoken to them forever. So it's important to understand that while your perspective may be similar, we're all individuals and we're all going to experience grief separately and individually. So even if you lost your spouse, the loss of someone else's spouse could be very different. They could have had a closer relationship than you had with yours, or a more distant relationship, which leaves them with regret. So the loss of a spouse and the loss of a child are, I think, two that we can really say, I know a little bit about how you feel. And I'm sure that that applies to every loss as well. But please don't ever say, I know how you feel because I lost my mom when I was 5. I lost my dog or my pet when they are experiencing the grief of a person. The one time that I will say, I lost my own fur baby, as people call him. I don't really use that term. I don't care. It's just, I lost my dog, my companion, is when someone has lost their own pet. I let them know I know a little bit of how they feel because I lost a pet as well. So please, again, do not discuss the death of an animal when a person has died. Another thing that many, many grieving people have told me drives them crazy is when people initiate the phrase, at least they're in a better place. I helped a parent grieve the loss of an adult child. And this parent was convinced that their adult child was not right with God when they passed away. This parent was convinced that their child was not with Jesus. That's pretty hard for a parent to deal with, to live the rest of their life believing that their child is not with Jesus. That's not something I would ever say to someone because I don't know where anyone is. My opinion does not put someone in heaven or hell. I just say they are in the hands of a God who loves them even more than we did, and he is the righteous judge. That means when we say that God is righteous, that means he is always right. And God always puts people where the right place for them is. So I don't ever try to tell people that their loved one is in heaven or in hell if they ask me. That's not my place to say. Of course, if the person drives the conversation and they say, I'm so thankful that they are no longer in pain, I have let that person lead me into that phase of the conversation. And then I will say, oh, what a hope we have. I'm so thankful that they are no longer in pain. That's a beautiful thought. Yes, honey, I'm so glad you know that. I'm so glad that you recognize that they are where they need to be. And I always let the grieving person drive that conversation, okay? So the difference is from me saying, I know they're in a better place, or at least they're out of pain, that's actually something that people don't want to hear. Are you surprised at that? I was. Honestly, this mother taught me that by being honest with me. And she said, if one more person tells me that at least my child is in a better place, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to snap and lose my chickens. I was like, oh, really? Why? Because I thought that was an okay thing to say to people. At least they're not in pain anymore. But she did not want to hear that. And I'm sure she's not the only one that doesn't want to hear that. I've been told that several times too by people who did not think that their loved one was not with Jesus. They're just like, I'm sick of hearing they're in a better place. And the reason is because while our loved one may be in heaven and they may be in a better place, and we certainly hope that they are, that means that they're not here with me. That means that my husband is not here with me. He's with Jesus, and that's good for him, but it stinks for me. Yeah, he may be in a better place, but I'm not. I'm here without them. I'm here grieving and putting the pieces together and loving on these babies all by myself now. So that's not comforting. So let the grieving person drive the conversation. If they bring it up first, agree with them. Oh, what a beautiful hope we have. Heaven gets sweeter every day. But please don't say that first. Another thing that I recently had someone say to someone who I love who is grieving, they recently said, this person told me, I was crying about this person that I've lost, and someone said to me, well, you're just being selfish by crying over their death because you know that they're with Jesus. And so if you are crying and you are grieving, you are selfish. Stop crying. You're being selfish. No. Oh, no. And here's the thing. Was that person's intention pure? Yeah. That person that said you're being selfish while you're grieving, they had a pure heart. Their intentions were good. Just like people who say, oh, I know what it's like to lose a child. My dog died. their intentions are good. But let me tell you, especially in grieving, intentions don't count. I'm sorry. Your words can hurt the person who is grieving and make this process so much more difficult and painful for them. And because we are not evil people and we are not looking to increase someone's pain or grief, we have to be careful with the words that we say. The words that come out of our mouths have got to be studied and careful. And that's why I think this video is important. If you can go into a grief situation and know what not to say, and I'll replace these things with things you can say, you're going to help people who are grieving and not hurt them, because I know that's no one's intention. But especially with grieving people, intention doesn't count. Your words matter. Weigh them carefully. I also recently had a grieving person have someone say this to them. Well, at least you're not fighting with them anymore. At least you're no longer arguing. This was such a slap in this grieving person's face. They were saying, I trusted this individual with the information that the person who has passed on since and I were arguing in the past. When we were arguing, I shared that piece of information with this safe person, this friend. I told them, oh man, we've been arguing and fussing and it's no fun. Then the person passes away, and that person who was expected to be a safe place and a trusted friend came back to me and said, well, at least you're not fighting anymore. Oh dear. The grieving person started crying and said, that was a slap in my face. That was a punch in my throat on one of the hardest days of my life. I am trying to breathe in and breathe out and get over this loss. And here this person said, well, at least you're not fighting anymore. And if that's all my friend took away from that conversation is that we were always fighting, they weren't listening. I wasn't fighting with this person when they died, and I miss them greatly. So please don't bring up things from the past that you know about the relationship in an attempt to comfort a grieving person. It will not work. It will have the opposite effect on people. And this is one of the most important things, and the last thing I'm going to give you on the things not to say. Please stop saying this, especially to children. If you say the words, God needed them, or God needed them more than you did, God needed them more than I did, I'm sorry, it's a lie. That is an unintentional lie. That is a lie told from a good place. But good intentions do not make this true. God does not need anyone. Who is man that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? Look at when God talks to people. Excuse me, Job, where were you when I hung the heavens? Where were you when I stretched out the globe? God does not need any of us. And especially when you tell a child, God needed your daddy more than you did, you're not comforting that child. I'm sorry to say those words are very, very damaging. God doesn't need her daddy more than she does. He doesn't. She needs a daddy to love on her and take her on dates and walk her down the aisle and go to her graduation and tell her she's beautiful when she's dressed up for prom. Girls need their dads. And telling a child or a spouse that God needed their person more than they did is a lie. God doesn't need us. Now, it was God's will. I absolutely believe that every death, including the untimely deaths in my life, are the will of God. He is the author and finisher of our faith. He is the giver of life. All power in heaven and earth is given unto him. Could God have prevented these deaths? Yes, he could have. But he chose not to in his wisdom, because his ways are above my ways. And his thoughts, they're above my thoughts. And while I would have kept my people with me much, much longer, and when I would remove a grieving person from this fiery furnace, God has allowed them to be in this place at this time, and he will be with them. Please stop telling people. Please stop telling people that God needed their loved one more than they did. My husband and I, over the course of our pastorate, and he is also a hospice chaplain. So I know what I'm talking about. We deal with a lot of grieving people. This is what we do for a living. Pastoral care is often grief counseling, and telling people that God needs them is painful. So many funerals, I've heard that song, which I hate. And I'm not being critical if you've used this song in ignorance. It's okay. It's okay. I'm not talking about any specific person, but I've heard these songs that say something like, heaven must have needed a hero. I guess God needed an angel. I guess God needed you more than me. Those lines are in so many songs, and every time I hear them in a funeral, I'm like, no, he didn't. Stop telling these people that. That makes a child especially resent the God who took their dad. It makes us resentful. It's not helpful as we intend it to be. So please stop saying that God needs our person more than we did. So let me replace that with some things that we can say. I do want you to say to someone who is grieving, I'm so sorry for your loss. When you don't know what to say, if you're one of those who has said, I never know what to say when someone has passed away, and I've been there without all the experience I've had under my belt in the last many years of living in ministry, I've said that before. Here's the answer. I'm going to tell you what to say. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for this. I'm here for you. I'm praying for you. Another thing that we can always say that is appropriate to a friend, instead of saying, what can I do to help? Or how can I help? That's also something I'd like you to stop saying if you can. And here's why, not because it's damaging or untrue or unkind, but it's very hard for a grieving person in some of the hardest days of their life to reach out and say, friend, I need you to buy me dinner tonight, because the thought of feeding my kids makes me want to cry. I can't do it. The question of what's for dinner when I'm trying to plan a funeral is more than I can handle. I have answered so many questions today. I have put together so many details today. Or in the space of time after the funeral, I'm done. I'm zapped. I'm wiped. I can't think. I don't know what's for dinner. What's for dinner just makes me want to sit on the floor and cry. So here's what you do. You organize a meal train for them. There's apps out there that'll help. I'm not here to instruct you on those. But to provide meals for the person going up to the funeral and or a couple of days after the funeral is so helpful. And you don't say, can I bring you some food? They'll probably say, I'm fine. But say, I'm bringing you food. Tell me what kind of Sonic drinks your family likes. Here in Oklahoma, Sonic drinks equal love. Say, what kind of pizza does your family like from Pizza Hut? I'm sending you dinner tonight. What kind of laundry detergent do you use? I'm going shopping for you today. Another thing that you can bring, if they say, please stop bringing food, we have so much food. There's no more room in our refrigerator. Be respectful. And when it's time to stop bringing food because they have enough leftovers to last for 2 months and feed an army and they feel guilty throwing it away, you take paper plates, napkins, disposable cups, disposable flatware, plasticware. You take toilet paper, trash bags, laundry detergent, deodorant. Those kind of things help. And then I want to talk about when a mother with children that's still living in the home dies. That's a very important topic. That is one of the most difficult losses that a person can go through, is the loss of a mom who still has children at home. That's a tough one. We've helped some families like this. And let me tell you, the best way to help someone who has lost a mom while kids are still in the home is to, if you can, find out what brands of laundry detergent they use. Have someone who is a trusted family member. Do not ask the husband who has just lost his wife. Do not ask the children of the woman who has died. This is the question that you ask his mother or a trusted family member that's going to be in the house during this time trying to help them. Or if they have no family, a pastor, a pastor's wife, you have someone go with permission, of course, and look through a few cupboards, find out what kind of deodorant those children use, find out what kind of feminine hygiene products the daughters need. If there are girls in the home, find out deodorant, hairspray, shampoo, deodorant, I've already said that, conditioner, of course, laundry detergent, fabric softeners. Find out the kind of things that mom used to buy. Dads often don't do the shopping. They don't make the Sam's runs and they don't stock up on the favorite kind of paper plates for the family. Find out the drinks they like. Find out things that will help this dad keep his kids going with familiar things around them and laundry that smells just like mom did it. Take those things to the house. We did a huge Sam's run. We have a family that we love whose mom died with 4 daughters still living in the home. So we found out the things that they needed through his mother. We went to Sam's and we bought every single thing on that list. And we made sure that that family was stocked up for the months to come so that they didn't have to worry about personal hygiene items, feminine care products for this family. With so many girls, they're not going to want to ask their dad for that, probably. Most girls don't. They ask their mom for that. So we found out all those things. If it was boys, I would have been buying whatever brand of Axe or Old Spice is huge again. Old Spice, Swagger, whatever kind of things those boys needed and liked and used. Buy them socks, buy them underwear, buy the kind of things that mom would have been buying for the family. So we're going to find out what mom would have been doing and just take it. If you say to that precious dad, I'm here for you. Let me know if you need help. He doesn't know how to ask. He doesn't know what to ask for. So I'm here to tell you what he needs. Help him out in that way. Chips, cookies, snacks, frozen chicken nuggets, sodas, Gatorades, whatever you can think of. Things to help the family keep moving. If you find out that granola bars and bananas are what mom provided for breakfast every day, honey, go get those things and place them on that counter so those kids and that dad can have a little bit of normalcy and comfort at the loss of their mom. The same is helpful with the loss of a dad, because a mom may not feel like doing those shopping things, or just say, hey, is it time to go to Sam's? Can I do that for you? What does your family need? You want to go with me? Can I go with you and buy you some things at Sam's? That would also help a mom who has lost her husband and she has small children in the home as well. If you are wanting to help remember their loved one and you send things like cards in the mail or flowers or plants, that's wonderful. But let's not forget about gift cards for fast food restaurants, gift cards for maybe a sit-down meal, say Chili's. I live in Pryor, so we don't have a lot of sit-down restaurants, but I'll just pick them. They're a chain that is in a lot of cities. So pick them a place that maybe they would go. And I mean, there's something at that kind of a restaurant that everybody in the family can probably eat, including people who are gluten-free or have, allergies to dyes and things like that, or diabetics. You want to keep those things in mind as well. Give them gift cards to drive-thrus, to sit-down restaurants for gas, for groceries. Gift cards to Walmart are always welcome because there's probably a Walmart in every city, or Dollar General, or the places that the family likes to shop. And you can find that out by family members. Please do not ask the person who is closest to the grief. For instance, the spouse of someone who has lost their spouse, or the adult child who is trying to plan a funeral for their parent. Please don't call them and ask them where the funeral is or when it is. They will be posting these things on Facebook. Family members, if you don't know how to help your grieving family member, do this. Say, I'm the information officer. I will be on Facebook or Instagram or texting all the important people and letting them know updates on funeral arrangements, memorial arrangements, where you can send memorials and flowers to. That's important. Step in and be that person. Be the contact person for the grieving family member. We had to do that with my sister at the loss of her husband because of all the questions that kept coming to her. And finally, we 3 of the 4 sisters, the other of us 3, had to step in and say, that's enough. No more questions for Audrey today. She's answered enough questions. We're going to help make some decisions. And we would help with simple, basic things like who's bringing food. So when you can help with those kind of things, please, we think that asking the grieving person what they want or need is helping them. It is often not. Their brain is done. They're tired. They're finished with making decisions. And I'm telling you, is it okay if someone brings dinner at 5 or do you want them to bring it at 6? Might be the straw that breaks their back that day. A nicer thing to say is, honey, dinner is coming at 6 o'clock. It'll be here at 6. That's all she needs to know. Don't ask her things that she doesn't have to be answering. That will help that person. Let me tell you this. That's how to help people who are grieving. Now I want to speak very briefly. I'm trying not to be too long today, but this is so important. Let me help those of you who are in a grieving process right now. There are 5 stages of grief. There are not 5 stages of grief for the unbeliever. There are 5 stages of grief for everyone, for all of us. Now, while we who are believers may not grieve as the rest of the world does, that's true, but we still grieve. It's still hard. And I have seen pictures and videos of precious godly people. The ones that stand out in my mind are the ones who have lost a spouse or a child at a young age. Very, very hard things to do. And I've seen videos and pictures of you precious saints of God standing in that funeral with your hands raised to the air, giving worship and glory to God on one of the worst days of your life. I've seen those pictures. And when God miraculously grants joy and peace and a sense of gratitude and worship to a believer who is grieving, that's a beautiful miracle that God is providing. That is joy unspeakable and full of glory. I just studied that in 1 Peter today. And full of glory means that they recognize the character of God. They recognize the character of the one that they are worshiping at a funeral when they are the closest person to the one who has passed away. And you see them slip a hand up into the air in praise and glory to God with tears dripping down their face. It's beautiful to watch. But that does not mean that they are never going to feel sad, that they're not going to feel lonely, and that they won't go through the 5 stages of grief. Jesus said, blessed are they who mourn. And guess what? We all will. So the 5 stages of grief are denial. I'm going to use my Damon, my brother-in-law, as an example for this. Of course, the first thing I said was, are they sure it's him? How do they know? It could have been someone else. What if it was one of his men and not him? I didn't want to believe it. That phase lasted just like that for me. It sank in pretty quickly that there was no mistake made, that it was absolutely verified that it was our guy that had been killed in combat. The next phase is anger. And for me at that time, it looked like, why? Why? When there are so many deadbeat dads out there, there are so many addicts who don't want a relationship with their kids. And not just the addicts. I'm not trying to pick on our precious brothers and sisters, humans who are addicted to things. I'm not trying to down them. People who are mentally ill, people who just don't want a relationship with their family or their kids, even if they're not mentally ill. Jerks. There's jerks out there. Why weren't they taken and a loving dad left behind to care for his family? That makes you angry if you think about it. A lot of times this anger is directed at God. Why? Why did you take mine and leave that person alive? That's not fair. It's not right. That's anger. And you know what? It is a normal part of the grieving process. It is okay to be angry when you're grieving. And it's important to recognize that grieving people are often angry people. This is why people will basically get in fistfights at funerals. They will start. People who have never fought each other, siblings who have always gotten along, are now fighting over some pillow that mom crocheted, and who gets it because that pillow was not put in the will specifically and I want it. No, I was the oldest when she made this. I remember her making it and you don't, but I slept with it, but who cares? They'll argue and fuss about what seem like silly things, but remember, they're angry because anger is a stage of grief. So anger can be manifested in lots of different ways. So those of us on the outside watching a family go through turmoil and anger during your grieving process, just help to remember it's all a part of the process. They're grieving because they're angry because they're grieving. Next is bargaining, the third stage of grief. Bargaining for me with Damon looked like this. Lord, the next migraine that I get, if I get another one, would you please let that pain that I experience and that headache take away some of the pain that he must have felt with the massive trauma that occurred to his body when that bomb blew up. In his moments of consciousness, if he felt any pain, God, you do not work in chronological time. You do not work in chronos. So would you allow the next pain that I experience to have taken away some of his pain at that time? That's bargaining. It may not be a logical prayer. Grieving people don't make sense. Me too. I've prayed that. Lord, would you let some of my pain have taken away the pain of someone that I love that was suffering? Bargaining can look like that. Bargaining can look like, if you'll get me through this, I'll live for you forever. Bargaining can look like a million different things for a million different people because we're all individuals and we all grieve differently. There's no right way to grieve, but there is a wrong way to grieve. Getting stuck in any of the stages is the wrong way to do it. Stage number 4 is depression. That's very self-explanatory. Maybe you've stopped crying, but you just can't get out of bed. When my dad died, I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried every day for months. I did the same with Damon, but more specifically with my dad, because I was more in front of my kids when my dad died. When Damon passed away, I spent weeks with my sister Audrey in Oklahoma City, which was about 3-ish hours away. So I wasn't around my kids for the majority of the grieving process there, except for the night when we got the news. And I was sobbing so hard that my kids thought I was laughing. And I had a hard time when my dad passed away getting out of bed and doing things. I wasn't having fun in being a mom at that time. I was not joyful in my motherhood at that time because I was depressed. I missed my dad. I missed his phone calls. I missed his compliments. I missed my man. I missed him. So we all go through that. We all go through depression. It's going to last longer or shorter for different ones of us, but we'll all feel it. And the last one, the last stage of grief is acceptance. When you say, okay, here we are. This is what my life looks like now. And you finally recognize that you are going to have a new normal in your life. That is acceptance. Now, I want you to recognize what some stages of grief do not include. They do not include never feeling sad or never feeling lonely. That's not a stage of grief. You are going to feel sad. You are going to feel lonely. And I'm closing it up. I know the human attention span is not much longer than this. So let me break it down. One last thing. First are hard for grieving people. That first wedding anniversary, the first birthday, the first Valentine's Day without your person, the first Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, Mother's Day, Father's Day. Those firsts are going to be hard. Every first that you have without your person is hard. Anniversaries are going to be hard. The anniversary of their death, the anniversary of this, that, or the other. That's going to be hard as well. If you're helping someone walk the road of grief, or if you are freshly in it yourself, be ready. Headstone days are hard days. The day you have to pick out the headstone, the day you have to pick it up or see it be set are hard days. Be prepared to pull the covers over your head and cry on those days. And I'm going to finish with this. I'm done. Call the musicians. There's hope for the people. Time does not heal all wounds. And whoever said that was a liar and a jerk. If you have a compound fracture, you've broken your leg, say, and the bone is sticking out your skin. Time is not going to heal that wound. But time provides you the opportunity to take the steps that you need to take to heal that wound. It lets you go see a doctor, go see an orthopedist, have surgery, cast it, do the things, splint it, whatever it is that you've got to do for the wound. So time does not heal all wounds. The passing of time can allow our pain to get less over a long period of time. But we're talking definitely more than a year, because the first year is just going to stink. It is. The first year without your person stinks, and anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you. So time does not heal all wounds, but time will allow you to get into the Word of God and to get closer to Jesus. In our weakness, His strength is made perfect or complete in our lives. And if you never experience human weakness through grief, there are things about the character of God that you have not discovered yet, but you will, because you're going to grieve at some point in your life. And if you will allow your brokenness, if you will allow the things that broke you to bring you closer to God instead of drive you away from Him, His will be fulfilled in your life. And you will eventually, I know this is hard to believe if you're grieving right now, but there will be a day when you wake up and your loss is the second thing you think about in the morning. There will be a day in your grieving process where it's the third thing you think about. And then you'll realize you didn't think about it until you sat down for lunch. And then maybe you didn't think about it until you laid down for bed at night and you're like, oh yeah, this isn't a dream. This really happened. Man, I wish I could call my person right now, or I wish they were beside me in the bed right now, or I wish I was tucking them into bed right now. It's not a dream. This is my life. That's hard, but time and prayer and studying the Word of God, studying the character of God will help you get through that season. I'm in 1 Peter right now. I didn't really mean to bring this up, but the Lord's laying it on my heart, so I'll give you this. When we go through something like grief that requires God to extend grace to us, grace means the extension of God toward us. The word that I was looking at for grace is the Greek word charis, charis. It's Greek number 5485 if you're looking for it. And it says grace as a gift or blessing brought to man by Jesus Christ, a favor or kindness. 5485 also referred to as Charis, Xaris, or charis, Charis. It's preeminently used of the Lord's favor, freely extended to give Himself away to people because He is always leaning toward them. This answers directly to the Old Testament term in the Hebrew word number 2580, which is kana, grace, extension toward. Both refer to God freely extending Himself, His favor, His grace, reaching and inclining to people because He is disposed to bless and be near them. What a beautiful revelation into the character of God. God's grace means that He is extending Himself towards you. He is leaning towards you, and He is near to the brokenhearted. So if you are grieving today, or if you're going to be grieving in the future, which applies to all of us, let's not forget that God is always extending grace and favor. He's leaning in towards you. He loves you. Be blessed today. In Jesus' name, comfort those who mourn. Weep with those who weep, and let them drive the conversation. If you see someone who has suffered a loss and you say, hey, how are you today? And they say, I'm good today, and change the subject, follow their lead. Don't say, well, I was thinking about how you lost so-and-so today. Follow their lead. They know what they need that day. Trust them. I love you.